For this week's history video, I'd like to talk a little bit about how the Federal Reserve System was founded in 1913. And it's instructive in terms of our understanding how the Fed operates today. Before the Federal Reserve Board, there was really no national banking system. The United States had had a national bank set up by Alexander Hamilton for the first 20 years of its history. Then it lapsed. Then, after the War of 1812, Madison and Monroe set up a second national bank that lasted 20 years. Andrew Jackson refused to recharter it. There was briefly a national bank during the Civil War, but in the last years of the 19th century and the first decade of the 20th, it was basically a chaotic banking system throughout the country. But the economy was small enough that really a few people could control it. And one of the famous instances was there was a bank panic in 1903 or 05, and Theodore Roosevelt was president, and he called J.P. Morgan and said, "Can you stop this panic?" And he said, "Yeah, I think I can." And he sent his representative to the floor of the stock exchange, who announced loudly, "J.P. Morgan is buying." And all of a sudden the panic stopped and everybody stopped selling and order was restored. But by 1907, when another major crisis hit, another banking panic, it was too big for Morgan to contain. And at that point, people began casting about for a more permanent solution to managing the money supply. And there were two elements that kind of converged. One was the banking community, Wall Street and the investment people and J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and all the major special interests demanded an entity that would control the currency. They wanted the government kept out of it completely, and they wanted it to be a private operation, immune from political pressure, as they put it, which meant subservient to their will. And at the same time, the agrarian populists, the farmers, who had rallied around William Jennings Bryan in his 3 unsuccessful races for president, wanted a system that would have a more elastic currency. They gave up the idea of silver and gold being interchangeable, but they still wanted the money supply to grow with agricultural needs so they could get the credit they needed when they planted, where they wouldn't get money for the harvest until harvest time. They needed a bridge from the 2 seasons. And they wanted a Federal Reserve Board that would permit that to happen. There was also a feeling around the country that they wanted the banking system not to be controlled by Wall Street. They wanted something that was more evenly spread across the United States. So when he took office, Woodrow Wilson, as president in 1913, was determined to hammer out a Federal Reserve deal which could accommodate all of the interests. Wall Street got a Federal Reserve Board, and of the 15-man board that ran it, 8 were appointed by the president, and still are, and 7 are appointed by the Federal Reserve member banks throughout the country. That gave the liberals the idea of government control because it had a 1-vote margin, but with very significant banker representation. And the banks that controlled it, or named those 7 members, were spread all over the country. So the New York Wall Street influence would hopefully be diluted. And the board had very extensive powers to print money, to adjust the money supply, and to manage the nation's economy. Now, when it was set up, it had 2 goals. One was to stabilize prices, and the other was to protect the banking system. In 1946, Congress added job creation and fighting unemployment to the Federal Reserve's goal. Of course, now it doesn't do any of that. What it really does is funnel money to its cronies on Wall Street by printing money to stop a crash from happening in the stock market. And it has no relationship to the strength of the economy. It claims to be monitoring it. It claims to be encouraging a minimal level of inflation so as not to have deflation. But in fact, overwhelmingly, it is what former budget director David Stockman called the cash machine in the Wall Street casino. Thanks for watching.